Hey folks, how you doing? My name is Tim Black. Welcome to the Tim Black at Night Show. I have a gift enclosed in this show for you. It's going to be the gift of intelligent conversation about relevant issues. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a guest today I'm very happy to introduce to you. His name is Reid. He's the national organizer for Cut 50. Cut 50 is an organization that focuses on the formerly incarcerated. It's a grassroots groups across the country. They work to build and support reform efforts in our criminal justice system. You know, this is an issue very close to my heart. It's something I want us all to engage in. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Reid. Give it up for Louis, y'all.
Thanks, my brother. Appreciate you having me on.
Man, I want to thank you for taking time out from your work to sit down and talk and have this important conversation, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. This is not taking time out from my work. I think that this is actually an extension of my work. Oftentimes, I've heard when I was far much younger in my career that, a job that you have passion about and by which, you have just a love for, you never work a day. So this is an extension of my work. This is my work. This is the lifeblood that I breathe. And I'm just happy to have this opportunity to come on and talk about criminal justice reform.
Man, fantastic, man. I appreciate that attitude, man. And luckily, as you, man, I feel the same way about what I do. I feel like I'm not really working, man, when I'm doing something that I really care about. And as I looked after having a conversation with Teslin Figaro, and she told me about you, brother, I was extremely impressed with your background, the extensiveness. I've seen your conversations with Jamal Bryant. Shout out to Jamal Bryant out there.
Shout out to Bryant, yeah.
And brother, 15 years experience working in this advocacy. Could you tell folks a little bit about your background and what brought you to fight for criminal justice reform?
Sure. So, first and foremost, Teslin is super dope, right? Like she got that black girl magic. She's just one of those women by whom just exudes just a level of intelligence, man. And I think that particularly in our media platforms, you don't necessarily have that level of representation. So shout out to the sister, Teslin. But yeah, when you talk about 15 years of being involved in this work, my matriculation into this work didn't come by way of university. It didn't come by way of, having access to privilege, opportunity, position, so on and so forth. In all actuality, it came by way of the federal prison system. Back in 2000, I was indicted for bank fraud and felon in possession of ammunition because I had a moderate misdemeanor criminal history. It actually enhanced the sentence that I was actually exposed to, and I was sentenced to 188 months in federal prison. Now, for your viewers and your listening audience, you don't have to waste your time trying to calculate how much that is. That's approximately 16 years. And it was through the fire of that furnace of having been incarcerated, having been, around people who were excessively prosecuted, disproportionately sentenced, simply because they didn't have access to privilege, they didn't have access to resources, they didn't have access to power, they didn't even have access to sound education so that they could make an intelligent decision for themselves. It lit a righteous indignation in me. And with that righteous indignation, I said to myself, when I am released from, this 6x9 cell, when I am released from this institution, I'm going to do something about it. And I'm going to fight for the people whose voices are currently muted through a prison term.
Amazing, brother. This sounds like a very hard route to go. It sounds like I just imagine being away from family and friends that long a period of time. 16 years is a long. You seem like such a young guy right now, man. I feel like your uncle, and for you to say you spent that much time, and then I hear you talk, and my friend, you make me wish that I went away somewhere and had an opportunity to come back as articulate as you have.
Well, and I appreciate that. My grandmother who passed away this past April, and both my mother, my grandmother was, and my mother has always been a proponent of education. And one of the great things that my grandmother used to tell me is that all of life is a classroom. and we are perpetual students of something or someone. So we should always be in a posture of learning. We should always be in a posture of absorbing. So, what you hear from me is not necessarily something that I just discovered because I'm in this space. This is something by which, yes, I've demonstrated, an aberration of judgment. I've demonstrated a difference of character in many things. But, I was taught by two great women who actually really nurtured my precocious nature.
Wow. Well, you definitely do them proud today, my friend.
Thank you.
And the work that you're doing. So right now, as we talked about off air, Lewis, people are talking about criminal justice reform. Sometimes they use it interchangeably with prison reform, prison. And it seems like almost, I'm afraid it's like a buzzword or it's a buzz thing because it's hip right now. I mean, once Kanye was talking about it and we got Meek Mill talking about it, now Trump's moving on it. What has been your experience?
You got Michelle Alexander with the new Jim Crow. Right, that kind of like adds to the mix as well.
But see, I'm sorry, but Lewis, but when she talked about it like a couple years ago, that's when I became aware of it, right?
Correct.
Of course, I've known about it. I've got cousins. I got a cousin who did 10 years. So of course, I'm aware of criminal justice and how unjust or unjust it is. But when she spoke about it, it was just a level of detail, granular detail, that I said, this is the real deal. It's just when I hear other people sometimes talk, I'm not so sure that they're educated like you may be about the system. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I work for Cut 50, and Cut 50, as introduced, it's a national bipartisan organization who we have two primary objectives and goals. We want to be able to reduce the national prison population in half, and we also want to be able to reduce crime in half within 10 years. Cut 50 is co-founded by CNN political commentator Van Jones, who you may know, another black brother with the bald head, right? The only exception is that he wears glasses, and also Jessica Jackson Sloan. And our mission, in and of itself, is to make sure that those people who are currently incarcerated, their voices are carried out into the community. We do that through policy. We do that through advocacy. We do that through lobbying, and we do it through amplifying the leadership of people such as myself. Now, to specifically address and answer your question, we have a bill right now that is currently in the federal Congress, if you will, and the name of that bill is called the First Step Act. And you very well may have seen, the hashtag trending on Twitter or on your other respective social media platforms. But President Trump, he came out, approximately 2 to 3 weeks ago, right? And he's, said that we need to have this bill passed. We need comprehensive, we need copious, we need smart criminal justice reform in the United States of America. So I'm not of the notion about just because people do the right things for the wrong reasons, that they should be excluded from the conversation. I'm not of the notion that just because a person very well may be a celebrity, that person can't use their privilege and they can't use their platform to be able to shine a light on this issue. I'm not of the notion that, just because a person very well may not be indirectly or have a lived experience through prison, that those people should be excluded from the conversation. I'm of the notion that if you want to get involved, if you have a platform, if you have a voice, if you have been affected by this issue, you should get involved. You should be involved. You should be expressing your voice. You should be amplifying these issues, and you should be standing side by side, arm by arm in arm, leg by leg, and we should be holding the line together. This is not a black issue. This is not a brown issue. This is not a white issue. This is an American issue. And that's, simply where I stand. And, a lot of my constituents and a lot of the, the people that by whom, I share this space with, that's just what our notion is.
I definitely appreciate that, and I respect that standpoint. I agree with you that if it doesn't much matter why someone feeds the homeless, man. I'm just happy that the homeless are being fed, and if someone from Kanye's position or Meek Mill, whoever it is doing the right thing, I want to applaud that and support their further education. Also, something you mentioned at the very end of your statement, you said it's not about race, it's about it's not so much about race, but I think about Ben Jealous, here in Maryland, he ran for governor, and he said something one day that kind of lit me up, and let me throw it on you. He said,
community, and many of our white brothers and sisters have been stuck too. Look, we don't just have the most incarcerated black and brown people on the planet. We also have the most incarcerated white people.
He said, Tim, we have African Americans that are incarcerated at such a high level, but you also got to realize white Americans in America are incarcerated at a very high level too. Like the most incarcerated white people live in America. And I'm like, wow. Right. So I wonder if we can all kind of like bond together and kind of like battle this issue, all races, all people,
Yeah, and I think that when you look at it, oftentimes, historically, and this is not to suggest that there's not a racial divide in America, and this is not to even, imply or infer that people have not exploited these racial divides, right, and these racial chasms. And I'm not suggesting that at all. What I am suggesting is this. I think that this is an issue that has impacted people of all classes, of all spectrum, of all demographics, of all whatever fill in the blank that you want to add. This criminal justice issue, let's just pause for a second and let's talk about numbers because you introduced it. We have approximately 70 million people in the United States of America who are living with criminal convictions. Not 7 million, 70 million. So we are a minority of a majority. And you think that there are 70 million black folks who are living with criminal convictions? Absolutely not. You think that there's 70 million Hispanic folks that are living with criminal convictions? Absolutely not. There's 70 million Americans who are living with criminal conviction. And I think that, yes, our community has been, disproportionately impacted. Yes, our community has been decimated. Yes, our community has been bankrupted, specifically when if we follow the criminal justice thread, it goes all the way back to the Nixon administration. It has actually been exacerbated by the 1994 Clinton crime bill. And I think that when you look at who we are as a community, we have always been on the lower rung of betterment, at every equation, whether that's healthcare, whether that's, access to mental health, whether that is, any other fill in the blank. We've always been at the lower rung of that equation. However, opioid use has become to white America what crack cocaine was to us. And now that you have people of privilege who have to lock up their children. You have people of privilege who are being locked up themselves, and they're being criminalized just because they have an addiction issue, and they are applying criminal solutions to social ills. Now those people who are in positions of power, positions of privilege, positions of authority, now they're saying, hold up. We need to step outside of our comfort zone. We need to step across the aisle, and the left needs to work with the right needs to work with the left, the black needs to work with the brown needs to work with the white, and everybody in between, so that we can make this issue and we can make our criminal justice system recalibrated and in the spirit of what our founding fathers actually, foresaw our criminal justice being: equity, justice, and, in the words of Dr. King, something that is going to be inclusive for all people, not the exclusive for a minority.
Absolutely agree with you. As they announced the First Step Act, I was one of those people that reported on it, and I did so favorably. And I was optimistic. I was energized by it because I'm enthusiastically looking for support for criminal justice reform. But then I was cautioned, Lewis, that maybe, get too excited, Tim Black, because then they started naming some things about this particular act that may give me pause. Yeah. One of those being that we're talking about the federal prison system, not about local state governments where most people are incarcerated. What's your response to that, even though you support the act, obviously?
Yeah, absolutely. In full transparency, support the act. When the act was first, rolled out, and when it passed the House and back in May, I wasn't as much of a staunch supporter of the bill as I am now. Without persuasion, without influence, I literally, look through the bill line by line, precept by precept, text by text, paragraph by paragraph, and I, prosecute it and I interrogated what this bill actually, encompassed. And I'm going to walk you through, those things if you will allow me to. So on the prison reform side, this is what is, referred to in the criminal justice community as back-end reform. On the criminal justice on the prison reform side, first and foremost, this bill would be able to increase dignity and decency for women who are incarcerated, but just not women who are incarcerated, women who are pregnant and incarcerated. It would prohibit the shackling of women who are pregnant and incarcerated. It would, increase. Well, it would provide access, feminine hygiene product access without charge to women who have to, who may not have the family resources, to be able to subsidize, something that is a very basic need specific to that gender. So we want to be able to increase, decency and dignity for that particular population. I will say, I was involved in the state of Connecticut, where I'm from. I was involved in a bill that was passed in the last legislative session. It's called the Decency and Dignity Act for Women Who Are Incarcerated. I can't tell you, Tim, how that increased my literacy of my male privilege. Listening to testimonies, listening to very riveting and graphic testimonies. Topeka K. Sam, who is our dignity director, she talks about, and it's hard for me to hear as a male because I can't necessarily relate, but she talks about how she had to quantify her cycle while she was incarcerated. And when I sat down with her and I talked to her about it, I was like, what do you mean by that? She said that she literally had to take her, used sanitary napkins, bring them to the officer because she had an excessive flow due to a, pre-existing medical condition. She had to bring them to the officer. The officer had to count how many she used before he or she would actually issue her institution-based feminine hygiene products. I see you making a face like which,
it's crazy.
That's something that you can't even fathom. It breaks my heart. I can't even.
Demoralizing. It's inhumane.
Right. Yeah. And I'm a male and I feel this way. Right. So imagine, the women who are currently incarcerated right now that have to go through, the same thing on a federal level. The other thing that I think is very imperative and I think is very important is that the First Step Act would actually increase the good time credit for people who are incarcerated. As it stands right now, the intent for Congress, for people who are incarcerated on a federal level, they were supposed to receive 54 days a year of good time. The BOP, by some sophisticated Einstein mathematical equation, they only give people who are incarcerated 47 days a year of good time. So we want to be able to increase that extra 7 days. And I always tell a story about how, people say, well, what's 7 days? When you are incarcerated, literally hour by hour, day by day, minute by minute, second by second means something. And when I was incarcerated, if I would have been afforded that extra 7 day good time, it would have knocked off approximately 7 months off my sentence. What does that mean? That means that I would have been home in time enough for my nephew who was killed to be able to grieve properly with my family and not necessarily within the sterile environment of an institution. So I think that that's something, that's a provision that, I'm very, very, very much a proponent of. And additionally, it would unlock education access to approximately 16,000 people who are currently waitlisted for basic literacy, Tim.
Wow. Basic
literacy, right? This is talking about GED testing. We're talking about vocational education access. We are talking about, I mean, just basic literacy. So we want to be able to provide, education opportunities for these people who are incarcerated. When I was incarcerated, I had the privilege of having my, post-secondary education subsidized by the goodwill of friends, by family, and also scholarships. However, everybody doesn't necessarily have that benefit. They don't have that privilege. They don't have those resources for people, to pull out, $1,000 from under the mattress and say, hey, look, I got you, because I know that you want to do something for yourself. And it will also be able to allow the ability for people who, such as myself, I'm a licensed clinician in the state of Connecticut. So people who want volunteer opportunities to be able to go back into institutions, to be able to facilitate courses, to be able to curate programs, so on and so forth, that would be able to unlock the opportunity for people like me to be able to go back and give back and let those people who are incarcerated know, hey, I haven't forgot about you, and not leave it solely to the discretion of a warden as to whether or not he or she wants to have people with criminal histories coming back into the institution. Those are just a few of the highlights on the prison reform side.
Well, of course, and thank you for laying that out, folks. I hope that everyone who's watching has, was able to take that in and take some notes. I know I did. And I was thinking, I kind of get some of the concerns now, but as you explain some of the advantages, it may not be everything that I'm looking for, but damn it, guys, it's more than what they have now. So my thing is, we have a Republican president in office. We have a Republican Senate. We just got a Democratic Congress, or a Democratic House of Representatives that hasn't even been seated yet. That's not, that's going to come in the new year. So why don't people want to just take what we can get now? Because these are human beings that we're talking about helping who need our help now. Here's
the deal. People say that this bill doesn't go far enough, and I stand along with that chorus. It doesn't go far enough. There are sentencing reforms in this bill that, when the crack cocaine, or it's called the Fair Sentencing Act, when that was introduced and that was passed in 2010, it wasn't passed retroactively. So what that means is that you have people who are serving a disproportionate amount of time who are unable to benefit from law that Congress passed to say, hey, the crack cocaine disparity was dropped from 100 to 1 down to 18 to 1, and it was unfair that they got locked out of that relief. And so on the sentencing reform side, we are seeking to have that change retroactive, which means that would immediately impact approximately 2,000 to 3,000 people. I was remiss not to say that on the prison reform side, with the earned good time credit, from day 0 to approximately day 120 or so, that would release about 3,500 people. So we're looking, just with those two provision alone, on the sentencing reform side with the retroactivity, and also on the prison reform side with the earned good time credit, that would release approximately 7,000 people. Also on the sentencing reform side, you have what's called 924C stacking. And in layman's terms, what that means is this. If you, Tim, say for instance, if the police came to arrest you for a warrant, and when they came into your house, if they, say for instance, if they found some marijuana on the table, if they found, some heroin that you were using or something to that degree, if when they arrested you and your grandfather, if he had an inoperable gun that was above the mantle, this is a family heirloom, because you had drugs and you had a gun in the proximity of drugs and you are a convicted felon, that means that you could potentially be exposed to a 20-year sentence, because that the sentence that you receive for the drugs would run consecutive to the sentence that you will receive for the firearm. And that's just absolutely wrong. So that's another provision on the sentencing side by which we are trying to change. Also, and I know that your listeners and your viewers very well may not want to be bogged down in the sentencing code minutia of it, but those are just certain examples of how unfair our system is. So as it relates to the people who said that this bill doesn't go far enough, I'm in the chorus of that. This bill doesn't go far enough. As far as I'm concerned, we need retroactivity for everything. We need to reduce crack cocaine disparity down from 18 to 1 to 1 to 1. We need, when you look at 851, 841, and that's a sentencing code. When you look at 924C stacking, as mentioned, when you look at expansion of the safety valve, when you look at the plurality of other things that are in the U.S. United States sentencing code, we need retroactivity for everything, as far as I'm concerned. However, this is a first step. This is not the final step act. This is a first step act. And the first step to a long journey by which we are passionate about, that we are poised, and we are, pardon my language, damn sure adamant about making sure that our criminal justice system is recalibrated and that we have justice, and not just us, but that we have justice and equity for each and every person who actually demonstrates that aberration of judgment, has to stand in front of a judge and be adjudicated guilty for it.
Absolutely. Well said, Mr. Reid. Well said. The first step is a first step, not a last step, and there's many other steps we need to take. I'm just looking at the notes here, folks. This act began as a prison reform bill introduced by Representative Hakeem Jeffries and Doug Collins. It passed the House 360 to 59 back in May with support.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry. Can you just repeat that for 1 second? What was the numbers by which it passed the House?
360 to 59 with support.
360. Yeah. That means that it's 360 in support. This is bipartisan support.
Absolutely.
To 59.
Yeah.
That was on the House side.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, finish. I wanted to underscore that, right?
Yeah.
Because this is not a divisive issue. With all of the issues that we have in the United States of America that divides us, with all of the issues, whether they're racial issues, whether they are financial issues, whatever the issues are, whether it's the issues with this current administration, etc. This is the one issue that we have in our political circus that is happening with our elected officials, by which people are standing united on. I mean, we are standing united with, organizations literally all across this nation, many of whom initially were opposed, and many who strongly dissented on this bill for good reason. You have the likes of the ACLU, who came out and said, hey, listen, this bill doesn't go far enough, and we're going to make sure that, this is not the final step. However, what we have now and what this bill proposes to do is far much better than what currently exists, which is absolutely nothing. So I just want to allow you to, continue to read the merits of the bill, but I actually think that was something to underscore.
No, you're absolutely right. It is something to underscore. And I think one of the pushbacks from the bill is that, with a lot of the disgust or anger towards President Trump.
Correct.
That's my audience is a little bit different. I want you to know that, Louis, my audience is a little bit more open to Donald Trump policies, as long as the policies are good policies. I mean, I tell my people all the time, it's policy over party. Right. Mm-hmm. So if we focus on that, and this is one of those policies, I think that people can gravitate to, regardless to what's their political affiliation. But I'd like to, I don't know, in your work, because I know you do a lot of traveling, you're an advocate, you go across the country. What's been your response? Why does it seem that way? Why are people willing to talk about criminal justice reform? What's the secret ingredient in this particular conversation?
So I think that there is no secret ingredient. I think that what happened is that sin is indiscriminate. And when you have, something that steps into your space, and when you begin to be, impacted or, affected by something, it makes you look at things differently. When you have the propensity to be impacted or affected by something, it makes you look at things a little bit differently. I just want to pause for a commercial break there and get right back to the situation as it relates to Donald Trump. I am not a proponent of Donald Trump. Let me just set the record straight, right? I have written in, the Huffington Post as a contributor. I've written several articles about the trouble of Trump's criminal justice policies when he wasn't doing anything, earlier on in his presidency. I've written about the story of OJ, race, the Republican and the NFL, where he talked about the SOB, Colin Kaepernick, so on and so forth, right? So I have written extensively about Donald Trump. As Van Jones says, we disagree with this administration on 99% of issues. However, when you have somebody that stands in that 1% minority and they do the right thing, irrespective to whatever their motive is, when they do the right thing on an issue by which you have been attempting to get traction on, that you have been attempting to introduce, that you have been attempting to, bring people home to their family. When they get it right in that 1%, you have to acknowledge them. You have to acknowledge it. You have to acknowledge, at the very least, on this issue. I disagree with you on everything else, but on this issue, I find common ground with you. Also, I'll point to history. I had a conversation with Isaiah Washington not too long ago. And within that conversation, he said something to me, and it was almost like a Looney Tune cartoon where the light bulb dinged over my head. He said, it's interesting that on this issue, people can't dichotomize Donald Trump from the policy and him coming out to endorse it, so on and so, to support and endorse the bill publicly, so on and so forth. He said, however, LBJ was a racist, and the country knew that he was a racist. And he had no compunction about being a racist. However, that didn't stop Martin Luther King from working with LBJ on the introduction of the Civil Rights Act. And so I say that to say, how soon do we forget? How soon? I'm of the notion that better the bigot that you do know, rather than the bigot that you don't know. And this is not to cast dispersions on this administration. I think that we have a very strong ally inside in the form of Jared Kushner, whose father did federal prison time, and he has been, a staunch champion on this issue. He has been at the forefront. He has been the quiet storm in this issue. He's worked hand in glove with our national director and co-founder, Jessica Jackson Sloan, alongside with Van Jones, etc. On 99% of the policies from this administration, I absolutely disagree with. Me personally, not Louis L. Reid as the national organizer for Cut 50, not Louis L. Reid, traveling the country, so on and so forth. This is Louis Reid as a person who is formerly incarcerated. I disagree with 99% of the policies that come out of this administration. But on this 1%, I agree with them and I stand with them. And I'm grateful that we are finally doing something that is going to potentially bring people home by no later than as soon as maybe the new year, and as no later than February of 2014.
Well, I definitely respect your position on that. I, like you, have been a person who pushed back on Donald Trump policies when I felt it was important. But there have been a couple policies that I have agreed with, and I have enough ethics and courage and more conviction to say, this I support. I support this bill, but I also supported him on TPP. But you're right. There are very few things that I found that I can authentically support with Donald Trump.
Right.
Wow, brother. I think that, I also want to note, it's a small world because Isaiah Washington is someone that I confide in as well. And we've had conversations, so shout out to AI, my brother, for that. Yeah. But look, I have so much information in front of me. What are the next steps? I understand that this is coming up for a vote very soon. What do you know?
So right as it stands right now, as you mentioned, it passed 360 overwhelmingly with bipartisan support, 360 in the House. It's now currently on the Senate side. And we have, Cory Booker, who is in support of this. Everyone from Cory Booker to, people that you wouldn't have even thought on the Republican side, to Lindsey Graham, the who's who of the Senate political establishment is in support of this bill. And the only person that is the obstructionist to this bill as it stands right now are I shouldn't say the only person, the only two people, and one I don't even want to give a platform to, but I would. The other person I would like to highlight, because he is the gatekeeper of the sort, to have this bill come to the floor for a vote, and that's Mitch McConnell. So we are literally, at the 90, I was going to say the 97 yard line, but I don't know football, so I think that we're at the third yard line. Let me stick to an analogy that I know. It's 3 seconds left on the clock. We're down 2, and we got the ball. Right. So, we're in a timeout. We're in a timeout. We're discussing strategy. We're in our huddle, and we're going to break from this huddle. And, the only person that is standing in the way of us scoring this basket is Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader.
Wow. Well, let's hope that Mitch McConnell decides that he wants to be a hero instead of a villain in this particular case, and does what's right for the people. And as you pointed out so eloquently, Louis, that this is an opportunity, a bipartisan opportunity for us to unite around a common good. And it's more, all of us are affected by this. Everyone I know, there's somebody in their family that's been dealing with criminal justice in some way, whether they're incarcerated or they're on probation, or if they're being fined to death. There's some way, somehow attached, someone in someone's family is attached to the system, and it's just too much, man. You go right ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say also, say, Tim, as well, is this. Oftentimes when you get bipartisan support on something, it comes by way of a tragedy. It comes by way of a 9/11. It comes by way of a Katrina. It comes by way of a Columbine. It comes by way of a Virginia Tech. It comes by way of a Sandy Hook. It comes by way of a tragedy. This is one of the few opportunities that we have in our political space, in our Congress, that we can come together in a tragedy. Notice that I didn't say that this is not a travesty, but a tragedy doesn't necessarily have to be the impetus. A tragedy doesn't have to be the driving force. A tragedy doesn't have to be the fuel that is perpetuating this engine in order for us to be able to come together and say we have to do something about this issue. Yes, it's a travesty, but it's not a tragedy that can actually bring us together from the right to the left and the left to the right to meet right in the middle.
Well, brother, I surely hope that that's the case, and I hope that the Senate goes the way of the House and we get this bill done. Thank you so much for your time, Louis. Louis, tell people where to go to find out more about Cut 50 and about your important work.
Absolutely. So if you want to know more information about the First Step Act, you can go to the firststepact.org. Again, that's firststepact.org. You can go to firststepact.org and log on and find more information about it. You can literally tweet to your senator. We have a pre-made letter that you can fill out. It takes approximately 30 seconds. If my mother can go on this website and navigate it, appropriately, then anybody can do it. So you can go on there. You can tweet to your senator. You can tweet to Mitch McConnell's office. You can, send a letter that we have pre-made for you, so that you can let your elected officials know that you want this bill passed. Also, if you want to get in contact with me, I'm on Twitter at Louis L. Reid. Louis L. Reid, that's R-E-E-D. I'm also on Instagram at He Inspires 4 Real. And shamefully, I'll say this, and I hope that my children aren't watching, but I'm even on Snapchat, man. I'm about that Snapchat life, man. I'm on Snapchat at He Inspires for Real as well. And then you can also find me on Facebook at Louis L. Reid.
Well, look, man, you heard it, guys. Louis L. Reid on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, even Snapchat, man. Like that's
He Inspires for Real. Yeah,
man, that's the only platform I'm not on, man. Is Snapchat. I felt like I couldn't do it, bro. I just couldn't hang.
Yeah, stay away from it if you got children, because they
I do, bro.
My kids tell me all the time, Dad, you got no business being on Snapchat, and I'm like, follow me, man.
I love it. Well, look, Louis, thank you once again, man. It's been great having a conversation with you, and I'm gonna keep following you to find out more about your work, man.
Appreciate you, man.
You got it.
I just followed you on Twitter. So I want your viewing audience to know, if you don't follow me back, I'm going to troll you, and we're going to have an issue.
Well, that's okay. I think I followed you, but I'm definitely going to, and I'm gonna tweet to you. So guys, when y'all see the tweet, you know where he is exactly. Then there's no excuse not to follow him back.
Appreciate you.
You got it, Louis. Thank you, man.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Grateful of the opportunity.
You got it. Well, guys, look, thank you so much, everybody who tuned into the show tonight. Once again, that is thefirststepact.org. They have it set up so you can just basically push a button and the letter will go out. Okay, so some progress on this issue is better than no progress on this issue. All right? All right, guys. Thank you once again for tuning in. I'll see you soon. Don't forget, Real Tim Black on Facebook and on Twitter, and I am Tim Black at Night on Instagram. And I'll see you on the next one.